Isn't this just the most wonderful thing you've ever seen? We are into the quarterfinals. Felt like we'd never make it this far, but we have 8 cities all vying for the crown here in the Global Cities 2020 tournament on GeoBrax. This is episode number 13. I'm joined by, he's not a robot, Mr. Master of the Draw. And to start off this illustrious episode, we have the quarterfinal matchup out of quadrant number 1. We have the hottest city in the tournament, that is number 17 overall seeded, Seoul, South Korea. How many categories have they lost? 2. How many have they won? 14. They're 14-2. Contrast that with their opponent here in this matchup, number 34 overall, Istanbul, Turkey. How many have they lost in both of the previous 2 rounds? 3 categories. That's right, they had to win 2 straight panel discussions, but it's an equal playing field. Who's going to take this quarterfinal? Category 1.
Largest urban park.
The largest urban park in Seoul is the World Cup Park. 857 acres. Largest one in Istanbul is Yildiz at 124. Seoul, they're not slowing down. They're up 1-0. Second category, please.
Annual rainfall.
Annual rainfall of Seoul is pretty run-of-the-mill, 1,233 millimeters per year, but in Istanbul, much drier, 640. Seoul is just mowing down the competition. They're up 2-0. Can Istanbul come back?
Public transportation usage.
Istanbul, known for having many types of public transportation, from funiculars to ferries to underground unmanned sea tunnel trains. 30.59% public transportation usage to get to work and to school, but in Seoul it is 52.68%. Seoul up 3-0. Are they going to sweep again?
Busiest airport.
We have to put a big time caveat here, because Istanbul's IST airport opened in late 2018. The only numbers available from 2019, when it was just getting the airlines to start flying out of there. That is to say 52 million passengers, which almost assuredly, if we had the 2021 numbers, they would be whipping Seoul in this category. But as such, the Incheon ICN airport at 68.3 million is for the time being busier, which means Seoul has swept yet another major city. They're 18 categories 1 and 2 lost, and they are on to the semifinals. High stepping in to the quarterfinal matchup out of quadrant number 2. This is a clash of top 5 seeds, and you love to see it. Number 5 overall, Beijing, China, taking on number 3 overall, Paris, France. How does this one start?
Busiest airport.
The Beijing Capital Airport has 101 million passengers per year. Charles de Gaulle, CDG, very busy airport, especially for Europe. 76.1 million. It's only 3/4 of the way there. That's a 1-0 lead to Beijing, category the 2nd.
Crime index.
This is a blowout. Not quite as low as some of the other East Asian cities, but 34.31 is a very, very good number. Paris, not so good, 54.96. Beijing up 2-0. Third category, please.
Gross domestic product.
Well, Beijing does not expect to lose this one. $554 billion per year. However, $880 66 billion per year. In Paris, they've cut the lead to 2-1. What is the fourth category?
Cost of living.
As you might imagine, it is still cheaper to live in China than it is to live in the most major of major Western European capitals. $4,900 worth of goods in Paris would have only cost you $2,946 in Beijing. They're up 3-1. Can they make it to the semifinals? Category 5.
International visitors.
We saw the airport is busier, but international visitors are only 4 million per year in Beijing. It's 17.6 million in Paris. They're down 3-2, going to the 6th category.
Highest elevation.
The highest elevation in Paris is higher than you would imagine, 131 meters. Highest elevation in Beijing, 2,303. You know what that means? They're going to the semifinals. Third quadrant. Action here. The quarterfinal matchup features the number 4 overall seed, Tokyo, Japan. They're taking on the cardiac city, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, number 27 overall. 2 straight panel discussions, 4 straight maximum category victories. Ooh, can our hearts take any more? First category, please.
Cost of living.
If you spent $5,093 worth of goods in this city, it would have cost you $6,100 in the other. This city, Dubai, the other, Tokyo. Dubai, somehow with a lower cost of living, they're up 1-0. Second category.
Best skyline.
As much as we do love the Tokyo Sky Tower and Mount Fuji in the background, the most distinctive building is the Metropolitan Government Building. I know that I gave this category to Los Angeles over Dubai, but in this instance, Dubai actually has a more varied skyline. It's smaller, but it's more varied. The Burj Khalifa, obviously the standout, but then you have the Marina skyline, and Dubai's taking this one. The better skyline than Tokyo. They're up 2-0. Third category, please.
Annual rainfall.
There it is. There's the Dubai we know and love. The drama's back. They only get 100 millimeters per year. Tokyo, pretty wet, 1,529 millimeters. It's 2-1 lead to Dubai, category the 4th.
Public transportation usage.
This is a disgusting blowout. 63.33%. People in Tokyo use their bus and their trains to get to work and school. In Dubai, right now, it's 11.19%. We're tied at 2. Cardiac City living up to its billing yet again. 5th category, please.
Purchasing power.
So Dubai won cost of living, and they're also going to win purchasing power over Tokyo. 8.81% higher, the thinnest of margins, but that means Dubai, you're cheaper to live in, and your money goes farther. You're up 3-2. Can you finish before the panel discussion?
Largest stadium.
The largest stadium in Dubai is not a football stadium. It is actually a stadium for rugby sevens. It's known as the Sevens Stadium. Great name, by the way. 44,000 seats. The largest stadium in Tokyo is the Japan National Stadium. 80,016. Dubai. Another tie at 3-3. We're going to a panel discussion. And we are back here with our first panel discussion of the quarterfinals. I am joined by the highly esteemed Mr. Botflow. So glad that you could make it here today. The first matchup we have is a fitting one, a stirring one, as you imagine it would be for a place in the semifinals. It is actually the number 4 overall seed, Tokyo. First time in the discussion. They are facing off against a city that is a lot more experienced in this situation. Number 27, Dubai, the cardiac city. We're not going to go over the history of Dubai. We already did the history of Dubai in episode 11. So no need to rehash that. You can all go back to the playlists. But we're going to talk about Tokyo's history. Tokyo, of course, was a fishing village known as Edo. It was established by the Edo clan in the late 1100s. Edo Castle, currently part of the Imperial Palace, was built in the year 1457. Now the city began its meteoric rise to prominence with the end of the Sengoku period of unrest in Japan, when the great unifier Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate in the year 1603. Now Tokyo was able to focus on infrastructure improvements because they weren't caught in any military strife during this long peaceful period. However, this long peaceful period did come to an end thanks to the United States Navy under the command of Matthew Perry in the year 1853. He forcibly opened the ports to foreign trade, and the ensuing inflation led to widespread civil unrest. It actually led to the overthrow of the final Tokugawa shogun, that was Yoshinobu, in the year 1867, and the next year, with the Meiji Restoration, the imperial capital was moved from Kyoto to Tokyo. In spite of all that long history, it wasn't officially established as a city until the year 1889. The 1923 Great Kanto earthquake devastated the city, but they always rebuild. The Ginza line of the Tokyo Metro was opened in 1927, the first subway line in East Asia. Now, the Allied forces in World War II had a very intense bombing campaign of Japan from 1940 to 1945. Population steeply declined. But when the occupation ended in 1952, the government heavily invested in flood control because in Tokyo they had suffered 2 major typhoons in the previous 2 decades. So lots of dams, levees, tunnels were constructed. In fact, Tokyo currently has the world's largest underground floodwater diversion facility, finished in the year 2006. Tokyo, of course, the most populated metropolitan area in the world. Only New York City has a larger GDP among metropolitan areas. Headquarters of 36 of the Fortune Global 500 companies are in Tokyo. And the stock exchange here is the 3rd largest in the world, and they also have the world's largest wholesale fish and seafood market, the Toyosu Market, opened in 2018. So, Mr. Botlow, as someone who knows the history of both of these cities, I guess it's time for you to pick one.
I will. I really will. Good to be back. Great to be here. And as always, I don't mince my words. I am going with Dubai. Sticking with my pick. Always have. I can't say always will, but Dubai is the winner here for me. Again, in my opinion, a much more of a worldly city. I know how important Tokyo is to the world, and not only e-commerce, but even throughout its history. Dubai doesn't have as long of a history as Tokyo, but when I studied both of these cities, in my opinion, Japanese culture, Japan, is unique in of itself, but throughout history you can see is they're not as embracing to other cultures, and I think that's what did it for me for Dubai. Dubai has a long way to go, I think, to rival Tokyo, but I think it has a brighter future. It's a much more open-minded culture, even being included in somewhat, you could say, conservative Middle East. Japan takes a lot of things from the West, but makes it their own kind of Japanese version of it. Or they give a lot of things to the West, but they don't necessarily adopt a lot from the West. And I don't think that's necessarily a knock on them. I just think, a future-thinking city needs to embrace all cultures, and I think Dubai wins it there for me. But got a lot of great things to say about Tokyo, but this competition, Dubai, got my vote. Back to you.
Thank you, Botlow. And of course, I'm going to have to disagree with you in this round. I am going with Tokyo.
Oh, man. Another competition.
Indeed. So why is it that I'm taking the opposite choice from you?
Do tell, do tell.
That's why they pay me. There's a lot to see and do in Tokyo. We failed to mention famous Asakusa, the shrine. You can see Shibuya Crossing, the world's busiest pedestrian crossing, also the Harajuku shopping district. You can go to the gaming and anime district. I don't know how many major global cities you can say that, but the anime district of Akihabara. And you can also visit the Shinjuku district and the Shinjuku-gyoen National Gardens in the middle of the administrative center of Tokyo. One thing that Tokyo has that you're not going to see outside of Japan is the fact that Shintoism is the distinctive religion. Completely unique experience. And they also have the Meiji Jingu Shrine as a prominent example in the forested areas right smack dab in the middle of Tokyo. So you have high-end finance, you have bigger economy still to this day than Dubai.
Agreed.
You have a much longer history. As we know, they're both fishing villages, but one was a fishing village a lot more recently than the other one was.
Mm-hmm.
Tokyo was hosted the 1964 and the 2021 Summer Olympic Games. And when it comes to sport, they're actually the home of the Japan Sumo Association, and they host 3 tournaments there a year in Tokyo itself. They have 2 professional baseball teams, the Yomiuri Giants and the Tokyo Yakult Swallows. So I understand the argument that Dubai is more culturally mixed or more accepting, perhaps less homogenous, if not in the terms of their population breakdown, then at least in the cultural thinking. But there's just so much going for Tokyo. It's so important financially, and it's been that way for centuries that I'm giving it the nod. Which means...
You tell me.
Oh, which means that you're going to have to get on the phone
Alrighty.
with my Anife.
Let's do it.
We're dialing him up right now.
First off, if we're talking about Dubai, we have quite a good landscape. There's the beach. There's, well, not necessarily a beach, but there is a body of water, and you also have a city around it. When you talk about beach cities, a lot of them cater just to that body of water, but this one has plenty to offer in the city itself. It is massive, and you do have visitors from all over, which brings a lot of diversity. Dubai is just a phenomenal city. It has what Tokyo doesn't. I can go down the line, but I prefer to leave a lot to the imagination. So I'll just say Dubai is the winner here.
Well, in shocking fashion, the number 4 seed Tokyo is crashing out at the quarterfinal stage.
Alright.
Oh my goodness. It's been 3 panel discussions for Dubai. The cardiac city keeps surviving. I'll let you speak to it. You seem to be their biggest supporter.
Well, it's some of the points I've made in the past videos and this video. I think my Anife, clearly, sees some of my viewpoints. He shares his own, very eloquently said, but, Dubai has it for me, and I wouldn't be shocked if, Dubai works their way to the top of this competition. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm excited for its prospects.
Would you like to welcome them to the semifinals?
Sure. So we are now headed to the semifinals. Keep on watching, everyone.
We're back for exactly one more quarterfinal matchup here. This one is out of the 4th quadrant. This one is going to end episode number 13. The lowest remaining seed, number 63 overall, Guangzhou, China. They've already taken down 2 teams in the top 10. They get a chance to do it again against number 2 overall seed, London, England. What is, dear Mr. Master of the Draw, going to be the first category?
Largest stadium.
You hear that? It's the sound of Londoners cheering the fact that the new Wembley Stadium seats 90,000 The people of Guangzhou, they have a stadium called the Aoti Main Stadium, Guangdong. Seats 80,012, very large stadium, and they're very much down 1-0. Second category, incoming.
Public transportation usage.
Does the underground have enough of a draw? Because they're going to have quite a high number. Guangzhou appears to be 4 out of 10, about 40% of people using public transportation to get to work and to school. And in London, it is 50.42%. London's up 2-0. Can they make it 3-0?
Purchasing power.
If you live in London, your purchasing power is higher than it is in Guangzhou. In fact, 19.8% higher. London is up 3-0. Can they sweep?
Cost of living.
There's usually the anathema to purchasing power. And it very much holds true here. If it cost you $1,899 in Guangzhou, it would have cost you $4,900. London still up 3-1. Can they finish in 5?
Surface area.
Surface area of London, England. Very vast. 1,738 square kilometers. So we can welcome them to the 6th category. Surface area of Guangzhou, 3,843 square km. They were down 0-3. Can they tie it?
Average high temperature.
That is just the most cruel category to pull on an English city. The average high monthly temperature of London is 14.17. Guangzhou, 28.06. They were down 0-3. They are tied 3-3. That means one more time here in episode number 13, we have a panel discussion. Back again so soon. Literally the very next matchup.
Oh my gosh.
Another panel discussion.
Coming down to the wire.
Indeed. The final quarterfinal here. This is going to be the only remaining unseeded team in this tournament. Guangzhou, China, number 63 overall. They're taking on number 2 overall seed London, England, who it appeared had an easy path to victory. They were up 3-0. And then Guangzhou pulled back. Category 4, Category 5, Category 6. Now we find ourselves here in a panel discussion.
Guangzhou, the ultimate underdogs, as it would seem.
Guangzhou, 120 kilometers inland from Hong Kong, up the Pearl River, is the capital of Guangdong Province. Its nickname is the City of Rams, in honor of the 5 stones at the Temple of the 5 Immortals. The stones are said to be the sheep and goats that were removed by the Taoist mythological heroes when they introduced the cultivation of rice to the area around the founding of Guangzhou, which would have been during the reign of Ji Gan, king of the Zhou, and he reigned from 314 BCE to 256 BCE. So that's when the founding of what was then known as Nanwucheng occurred. And in 214 BCE, the settlement was renamed as Panyu. It served as the seat of the Nanhai Jun, which lasted from the Qin dynasty all the way through the Tang dynasty. It was the capital of the Nan-Yue kingdom from 204 BCE, and in fact, trade was so prominent back then that they found artifacts from the times known as Panyu in India, Middle East, as far away as Africa.
Wow.
So it's been a center of commerce for a very long time. The Nan-Yue kingdom was annexed by the Han dynasty in 111 BCE. It was renamed Guangzhou in 226 CE when it became the seat of Guang Prefecture. So the Zhou suffix we've seen in Suzhou, Hangzhou, those are all seats of prefectures. That's what that suffix is.
Interesting fact.
Indeed, I just found it out during this research. Now, direct trade routes connected West Asia to Guangzhou, but in the year 878, rebel leader Huang Chao took the city away from the Tang dynasty, and the port was actually closed down for about 50 years after its destruction. In 1384, it was closed again to foreign trade under the Hongwu Emperor of the Ming Dynasty, curtailing its economic potential. But the Portuguese, they arrived in 1516, and the next year they brought 8 ships with them. But the Ming Dynasty was fearful of spying. So what would the Portuguese do? That's right, they had a battle. The Battle of Tunmen in 1521, which the Ming Dynasty won. Now, the local pirates, the Folongji, carried out smuggling operations. So in 1554, they finally signed an agreement with the Portuguese allowing trade, because it was happening anyway, might as well get some money for the government, right? The Qing Dynasty opened up to more trade after having secured Taiwan in 1683, and of course the Canton system that we talked about during the Hong Kong episode, 1757, allowed for the Kohong intermediaries to basically have a monopoly of the trade. And the most important exports at the time were tea and porcelain. Now, the Opium Wars. We've been over them before. The British captured the city in 1841 with the 1842 Treaty of Nanking. Guangzhou actually suffered because they lost their exclusivity among the southern Chinese port cities. And this led to more civil unrest. The Red Turban Rebellion and the Punti Hakka clan wars from 1854 to 1867 left over 1 million people no longer alive. And therefore a lot of the trade moved to Shanghai. Now in 1938 it fell to the Japanese. 1949 it fell to the People's Liberation Army. The Cultural Revolution did not do it any favors in development, but like so many Chinese cities we talked about before, including Shanghai, Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms of 1990 really brought Shanghai back into the world. They've had the biannual Canton Fair since 1957. It's the oldest and largest trade fair in all of China. And in 1992, they founded the Guangzhou Free Trade Zone. In 2005, they founded the Guangzhou Non-Shot Export Processing Zone, which is a horrible name, but that's what it is. And these have encouraged computer, software industries, logistics, processing, automobile assembly, biotechnology, and other heavy industries. And they've been drawing people from around the country. As of 2008, 40% of the residents of Guangzhou were from other Chinese provinces. So now it's the manufacturing hub of the Pearl River Delta. And it has the second largest bus rapid transit system in the entire world. And the subway lines, there are at least 13 of them in operation right now. Famous sites, not quite that many, especially for a city on the list for this tournament. The Temple of the Six Banyan Trees, the 5-story pagoda, and of course the Baiyun Mountain Scenic Area. Guangzhou FC, formerly Guangzhou Evergrande, is basically the best football club in the Chinese Super League, and the city hosted the Asian Games in 2010. Okay, we are moving on to the number 2 overall seed, perhaps the tournament favorite, London, England. Now, the Romans invaded the area in 43 CE, and the first major settlement was established in about 47 CE, but it was burned to the ground in 61 by the Iceni tribe. Now, Londinium, as it was known, was reestablished as the capital of the Roman province of Britannia in 100 CE. But with the collapse of the Roman rule, the walled city was left in ruins by the early 400s. Now, by the year 680, it was again a major port city, but the Vikings saw their opportunity. They came and they sacked it over and over and over again. That kept the city from prospering, but in the year 886, the West Saxon king, Alfred the Great, made an agreement with the Vikings. Please stop raiding us. And he got to move the city back into the old Roman walls, at which point London started growing. It was the largest city in England with a short period of time. Now, when William the Conqueror of the Normans came, won the Battle of Hastings in 1066, he was crowned at Westminster Abbey, which was finished the year before. Now, at this time, London was completely separate from the city of Westminster. Westminster was the governmental city, and London, of course, the economic hub. They had a bad period with the Black Death. The bubonic plague, 1346-1353, took 1/3 of their lives from them. The English Reformation is the next big period in the history of London from about 1524 to 1559. It changed it from Catholicism to Protestantism, which really opened up the economy because the property that was stuck with the church became private property, and it accelerated the growth of trade. In fact, the Hanseatic League, they had a port for a trading base in London from the year 1475 all the way through 1853. Now, the Royal Exchange was opened in 1571 in the style of the Antwerp Bourse. With some developments in the subsequent century, they overtook Amsterdam as the largest financial center in Europe. And they basically held that position ever since. They came up with the mercantilism system of economy where you focus on export, 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 and make sure you're not importing anything. And that's how they started ruling the world. In 1637, in something called the Great Refusal, the city of London refused Charles I's attempts to reform administration, which is why to this day the city of London is technically still only 1 square mile.
That's that's a very interesting fact.
So that's basically where the old city walls were. Of course, now it's like this county council or something like that that oversees what we would consider London in the modern era. The Great Plague of 1665 to 1666 actually killed 1/5 of the population. And then the Great Fire happened in 1666. It took them 10 years to rebuild from there. And in the wake of that, rampant crime actually led to the establishment of the first professional police force in the world in 1750, the Bow Street Runners. London was the world's largest city from 1831 to 1925. And of course, with all that traffic congestion, it led them to making the world's first urban rail network. And keep in mind, they already had the London Underground, which is the world's oldest rapid transit system, having opened in 1863. Now, in the wake of World War II, immigration from the Commonwealth, specifically Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, made London one of the world's most diverse cities. It used to be one of the smoggiest cities. They used to have things called pea soup fogs in London, which we have no recollection of, because by 1956, they had actually passed legislation to stop them in the wake of the Great Smog of 1952. Mr. Botlow. You know the choice is Guangzhou, London. Who's it going to be?
Well, again, without any further anticipation, my winner is London. I'm going with London. I'm actually stealing a page out of your book, The History of London. I just, can't. Guangzhou has a very bright future for itself, but I think in my eyes and probably many others, it's always been kind of a smaller stepbrother to Hong Kong and Macau. I think it's growing into its own. It will grow into its own even further. It's a developing city, but the importance London has had to the world, its cultural exchange, its history. It's such a major city in Europe that, connected with the world in so many different ways with the many cultures through the British Empire, just can't be beaten, And the fact that it's, it has its issues as everyone does, but such embracing of its different cultures and peoples that London is the winner, clearly. Back to you, GeoBrex.
The argument that Guangzhou is overshadowed by cities in its own river delta is a very strong one. We have Shenzhen on this list, we have Hong Kong on this list, and seeded number 6. And that's definitely a very important point to make. I'm going to take the positive tack here, though. London actually has 4 World Heritage Sites, as UNESCO defines them: the Tower of London, the Kew Gardens, the Palace of Westminster, and the Historic Settlement of Greenwich. It also has Buckingham Palace, the London Eye, St. Paul's Cathedral, Trafalgar Square, Royal Albert Hall, Piccadilly Circus. It's got museums that are world-renowned. We have the Natural History Museum, the Tate Modern, National Gallery, the British Museum. It has the most foreign banks in the city of any city in the world, over 480. It's home to the Lloyd's of London insurance market, the London Stock Exchange, the Bank of England. In fact, London is just a heavily outsized influencer of world fashion, entertainment, art, finance. It has the largest GDP in all of Europe. It's the 3rd most populous city in Europe. It has the most 5-star hotels in the world. So you want to go high end, you want to go low end? Well, not as low end as you want, but it's probably available somewhere. And it has 35,000 acres of public parks and gardens. Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens among the largest. Of course, sports. It's going to take Guangzhou. I named one football team. We have Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, West Ham United, Crystal Palace. It's hosted the Olympics, the modern Olympics of 2012, also 1948, 1908, the annual Wimbledon Tennis Championships. It has 2 rugby union teams in the Premiership Rugby League, and of course, spiritual home of cricket, Lords, is there. And of course, the Oval, which hosted the first ever Test cricket match on English soil in the year 1880. All these positive factors cannot be overcome. London is the pick.
It is the pick.
Indeed. And that means London, you're going to the semifinals. Wow, that was quite the episode. We're down to only 4 candidate cities. Those 4 cities are going to face off in the semifinals in episode 14 here on GeoBrax. If you want to follow along with the brackets and stay up to date and even see the answer guides to where we got our fancy numbers to decide every category from round 1 all the way through to the final, you just join the Discord. You can get it. It's free. Right there. Link in the description. And as always, because we are a YouTube channel, we are contractually obligated to ask you to subscribe at the end of an episode. And of course, this one is no different. I mean, why would it be? You're paying me to be a YouTuber, so I'm going to go YouTube on you. Deal with it.